Right, sorry for the delay. Okay. Okay, so for those of you who are listening to this as a recording, I'm Jude from Different Travel, and we're operating the trip on behalf of the Hadrian's Wall Trek for Autism next June. And I'm here just to tell you a bit more about the trip, really. And if we've got any questions, then please feel free just to dive in, ask as we go along. Don't need to save them up till the end, but we will ask again at the end. If you've got any questions, then just fire away. Okay, so the trip is 24th to 26th of June next year, and we're going to be walking a section of Hadrian's Wall. First of all, we can't go anywhere without talking about COVID, can we, at the moment? But just to say about our COVID-19 promise, obviously, no, I'm not going to read word for word what it says on the screen. I hope you can see that clearly enough. But basically what we're saying is if anything happens, such as a further lockdown, or there was information from the FCO to say that British travellers can't travel, then the trip wouldn't go ahead and you would have a full refund. So there's no problem there at all. Obviously, we're optimistic that the trip is going to be operating because you know, all the pointers are that the UK is, you know, that we're able and free to travel, but at the moment just nobody knows what could be in store. Obviously we're closely monitoring the situation the whole time, and we'll keep you informed, and your relevant autism charities will be notifying you as well if there's any question that it needed to be postponed and another date needed to be discussed. So obviously health and safety is our top priority, really. Okay, so a little bit about the trek. I don't know if everybody heard earlier, but I actually did this trek with another group just a few weeks ago, so I can talk to you, you know, with some information and sort of recent experience of it as well, still fresh in my mind. So we're going to be hiking along one of the UK's most famous historic landmarks. I didn't know that much about Hadrian's Wall before I went, but it was really fascinating, and we were extremely lucky with the weather, because even though it was October, it was just brilliant weather, and the views were just stunning. You can see a small picture there across the scene that you'll be experiencing. So Hadrian's Wall spans 73 miles from coast to coast, but you'll be exploring probably the most interesting, I think, section of the whole walk. It's roughly about 26 miles, and we're going to be following on an easterly route from Lanacross Priory all the way through to Brockalicia. John will probably correct me on my pronunciation here if it's not quite right, but that's the route that we're taking, and we'll be camping. Talk about the campsite in a minute, but if you can imagine, we're camping in the middle of that route that we're doing, and on the first day we actually take transport over to Lanacross Priory, and then we walk back to, sorry, we've got somebody who's coming in, so I'm just going to admit somebody in here. So that first day we drive to the beginning, and then we'll walk back to the campsite, and on the second day we walk from the campsite, and then we'll have transport back to the campsite. So we get, you know, a really good view of the whole of that route. It's just really stunning. So you've got all weekend through the Northumberland National Park, having a look at all of these remains of the Roman engineering and the spectacular landscape. So what is Hadrian's Wall? Okay, so it served as the northern frontier of the Roman Empire for 300 years, and it was built by 15,000 Roman soldiers over 6 years. You may have seen that Robson Green's documentary. I hadn't seen it before I went, and lots of people said how amazing it was. And so I've started to watch. I just watched the section that I did, and so I would suggest having a look at that, because it really does give you a bit of a feel for the landscape and so on. So the wall spans coast to coast from the banks of the River Tyne near the North Sea in the east to the Solway Firth on the Irish Sea in the west. And only 10% of the original wall remains to this day, as a lot of it was taken apart, used for housing and churches and castles all throughout the years. But the section that we're actually walking does have quite a lot of that original wall, and some of it's been rebuilt so that you can see how it would have looked at the time. So it wasn't until the 19th century that the archaeologists and historians actually took interest, and efforts were made to actually protect it from further damage. So in 1987, it became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So thankfully, they saved all of those building materials from being used again. So what's the terrain like? Most of the route is on good grassy paths and some stony tracks as well. There are a few stretches that you've got to cross roads and walk along them, and some of the sections may be muddy. There's some really steep parts, there's a lot of flatter parts. I'd say the first day, when you arrive at Lanercost Priory, you've got a first initial sort of hill, and then it seems to be a lot of it on a ridgeway, which then is undulating. So you've got a mixture of the grass, and some of it you're walking sort of beside the wall, some of it on the wall. But you know, the path is something that's been worn by millions of feet before us. So do prepare for steep inclines as well as declines as well. So it's really important to pack those walking poles as well. They are amazing. Even if you've never used them before, I'd really recommend taking those along. Okay, as far as how it's classed for difficulty level, the route that we're taking is moderately challenging, but they call the whole route, the 73 miles odd, as easy. But I think that's a very misleading description for the whole walk. So that's why I've kept that it is moderately challenging. The idea for this is that it is a challenge, a personal challenge for everyone. But if you're reasonably fit, then, and you do some hill training, because that's so important. It's not just the distances, it's actually practicing going up and down hills or steps. I mean, I live on the south coast, so we don't have very many hills around here. I have to drive to any hills nearby. So sometimes you'll see me running up and down the steps, or not running, no, that's a complete lie. Walking up and down the steps just to get used to the pressure on the knees, the hips, and so on. So do practice that. It's really highly recommended, but it's doable. If if you're a regular walker and if you train for this, you can do it, seriously. So the 23-mile section that we're walking is classed as the most difficult, but it's just spectacular. The scenery, it's just so worth it. I mean, that small picture there is one of the types of hills that you might pass, because obviously Hadrian's Wall was following the original landscape. They were making tunnels and things in those days. And another thing they say, obviously, bucket loads of determination and be the sort of person that can just dig deep and doesn't give up, because it's a long day, especially the first day. I think we're going to talk more about each of the days shortly. So again, we've sort of said about the good fitness level before you leave to have the best chance of completing the challenge. So doing some hill walking, and certainly recent hill walking as well. I mean, for anybody who's coming up from the south, which obviously was the direction I came in, I stopped off at the lakes on the way up and gave myself a little days walking there just to prepare myself, which was really nice. Actually, it broke up the journey as well, because it's a long old way from the south. I'm trying to think how far. Yeah, I should think even East Anglia. That's probably a fair old trek for you guys as well. So yeah, by all means, break that up. I mean, actually, I'm thinking now also within your areas, it might be a good idea if you can possibly talk to one another and even share transport. There was one group on my group that there were 5 women that came in one vehicle and a bell tent. I could not believe everything that was coming out of there. their car, but they did manage it, and obviously it just saves a lot on fuel, and we've got less cars on the road and so on. So if you can, that, you know, that's a really good thing to do. So just something to remember, it's not a gentle tourist hike, it is a challenging event. So you know, can't emphasize that enough, that, you know, this is a challenge, it's not just a walk in the park sort of thing. So some of the ascents are gradual, and you barely notice that you're gaining height, and some of them are short, sharp, and some of them are really long as well. I mean, this photo you see here, that's quite a famous picture of the Sycamore Gap, and you can see how the hill on either side is fairly steep down there. So you've got the recovery coming down, but you know, you've got to go back up. But surprisingly, a lot of people say, actually, I much prefer walking uphill, because that's a challenge on your lungs, whereas coming downhill, it's more a challenge on your joints and so on. So yeah, bearing in mind also that you can't walk at the same pace in those sections, and most of the time when we're back on the flat, we can sort of gather up pace a little bit then as well. Yeah, there's some talk about some people worry about slipping and discomfort with the knees, but if you've got good core, leg and glute strength, then that's very helpful for the challenge. But again, I'd say the poles are a must, even if you don't think you're going to use them. I think of them as like a banister coming downhill, so you can just plant the pole as you're coming down, just gives you that bit of stability. If you've got any questions, please dive in. I can't see everyone's photo, so I can't see if you've got a hand up, so just shout please if you do. Okay, so anyone can undertake this challenge if you're 18 or over, and if you've got somebody, a young adult, 16 plus, then they need to be accompanied by an adult. You need to be at a good fitness level and be able to manage yourself, so knowing how to keep hydrated, nourished, warm and dry, also be in good health and have lots of determination and a flexible can-do attitude, which is what we've already said really. And yeah, just pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. For some people, the challenge is funny, you assume that the challenge is going to be the walk, but for others the challenge is camping, because you know, this is a camping trip. Some people, the challenge would be mixing with people they don't know, and for others the challenge would be raising the funds for the trip as well. So you've got a real mixture of people on the trip and what they find difficult. But what I love about going on a trip is the group always bonding and helping one another through the difficult times. It's just a really rewarding thing to see and be part of as well. Okay, so for the accommodation, you're going to be bringing your own tents. This has been born out of COVID really, because I probably didn't mention earlier, normally different travel, we travel to destinations all over the world, but through COVID, a lot of the charities had asked us if we would please start doing some UK trips for obvious reasons. So the idea of bringing your own tents, at least then you're in control of your own environment and how you want to set out your own tent, and be comfortable that everything that you've got in your tent as well is hygienic to your own standards and so on. So that's the reason why we're saying bring along your own tent or camper. They can accommodate either, but you need to let us know at the time of booking what you have, and if it is a camper, the size of the camper. The tent is fine, we'll have the exclusive use of one field anyway, so if you've got a large tent, that's not a problem at all. So the campsite that we stayed in recently was called Hadrian's Wall camping and caravanning site, but it may not be that one. It will be a similar one, similar standard. So it's slap bang in the middle of that area that we were talking about before, near a place called Holt Whistle. I always want to call it Half Whistle for some reason, but it's Holt Whistle. So if you look that up, you'll be able to find it. But that enables us to do what I said before by traveling by coach the first day to the beginning of it, and then having a lift back at the end of it on the second day. So there are hot showers, toilet block, they've got Wi-Fi, electric hookups if you want them, and that's for the tents as well as the camper pitch as well. They do, that particular site has a strict quiet time policy, and they don't have open fires, which is pretty common as well these days. What should you bring? Okay, if you do decide to go ahead, then you will receive a full kit list, exactly what we would recommend you take in the way of clothing and so on. And nearer the time, we will have a pre-departure meeting as well. Either, no, it probably wouldn't be in person actually, because your charities are spread across the country. We probably do it on a Zoom again. So we talk more about the equipment then, and we can discuss all of that. But I would just say comfortable walking boots, not trainers. We really wouldn't recommend those because of the possibility of turning your ankle is just, you know, quite high, and you need that support around your ankle. So, you know, invest perhaps a Christmas present, or, you know, treat yourself in the sales to some really comfortable walking boots and make sure they're broken in. We'd say non-cotton clothing, because then there's the natural wicking process. So even if you do get sweaty, it does evaporate. It's just stunning how much better it is than wearing cotton, I can't tell you. You will be carrying your own lunch, which will be provided, and the drinks that you have for the day, sort of 2 litres minimum of water that you're going to need for the day. So that bag is going to be fairly heavy during the day for yourself. So practice with the backpack as well when you're doing your practice walks, because then when you actually come for the weekend, you'll be used to carrying that amount of weight. But you'd need to carry with you waterproofs, warm layers, sunglasses, a basic first aid kit, sunscreen, and so on. Everything else for your tent, the sleeping bag and toiletries and so on, you can leave at the campsite. Obviously, it's not one of those trips where you've got to carry all of it on your walk. So we're treating you this time. Okay, in June, temperatures are roughly around 16 degrees, and nights are cooler, down to about 7. So it can get windy up there. The first day I was there, it was fairly windy, and it was probably a bit like this picture here, the sort of mist in the background. But yeah, so you've got to be prepared for that wind as a possibility. The other 2 days, I must say, we couldn't believe how still it was up there. So, you know, it's just pot luck, as with the rest of the UK. Obviously, we can experience at any place in the country extreme deviations, like we did 2 days ago. We had a mini tornado rip through our close and damage some fence panels and so on. So anything can happen. And obviously that's one thing we can't control. So it is important that you take responsibility and prepare yourself for all weather conditions. Okay, so the actual itinerary. So day 1, which is Friday the 24th of June next year, we're asking people to arrive at the campsite and pitch your tent no later than 6 p.m. At least as your trip is in June, obviously the days are so much longer. So that's quite nice, makes the journey up a bit better. So then there's time to meet the group, and we'd also have a briefing over dinner that evening. All your meals are provided from the Friday dinner all the way through to lunch on the Sunday as well, in case you hadn't picked up on that. So that's the first night. Next morning it'd be an early breakfast, and we set off by coach, or depending on the numbers, minibus to the starting point. And as I've said before, pass through several villages, and the first large ruin is Third Oswald Roman Fort, which is high above the village of Gillsland. We do have a local guide. In fact, we have 2 local guides that will be taking us through the pathway, and also they have local information. They're full of all the history as well. So we've got somebody on hand who really knows the area very well. I think we mentioned this later on, but you will also have a different travel tour manager. There'll be somebody like me who's also experienced in travel and leading groups and so on. and they'd be more responsible for your health and safety throughout the trip and making sure that everything happens when it should do. But those local guides, you know, they were absolutely amazing and just made it really fun. They also give tips for walking, keeping the group together, obviously different standards, different speeds that everybody's got. So very experienced with all different groups and so on. So that first day is the longest one. It's roughly 15 miles that you've got. But really, I can't tell you how lovely it is at the end of the day when you're walking back to camp all together and you're just like, yes, we've done it, you know, that first day. And you're really looking forward to your well-earned dinner. So this section is considered to be the most difficult, but it really is breathtaking across the countryside.
Can I ask a quick question, please?
Yeah, please do.
On the Friday,
yeah,
I'm a TA at Portfield School for Autism Wessex. It may be that I need to work till 3:30. Is there any possibility that I'd be allowed to arrive after 6 o'clock?
Yeah, you'd be allowed to, by all means, Paul. It's just that you might miss out on the evening dinner.
Yeah.
And also the briefing. So if you could finish earlier, it would be more beneficial for you. And it is a very long drive.
Yeah.
So, you know, depending on whether you're coming up with somebody. But yeah, it's not that we're saying you must, but
I mean, I'll try my best to get the Friday off to get up. But yeah, I just thought I'd ask just in case.
Of course. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions from anyone while we're briefly stopping? No? Sorry, I can't see everybody all at once. I'm sort of scrolling through you. Okay, so that was day one with the 15 miles. Day two, we'll be setting off directly from the campsite, and then we continue walking east. You have great views towards the Walk Forest and also the barren Northumberland Highlands. So yeah, we're using the wall as our guide and continuing over cliff tops and crags and passing several lakes as well. I mean, it's quite surprising how varied the landscape actually is as well on that second day, and all the crags overlooking the lakes and so on. It's just, yeah, it's quite stunning. It really is. And of course, that second day is when you pass the Sycamore Gap, and also Housestead's Roman fort as well, before we reach our final destination, which is the ruins of Broccolicia. And that's where the minibus or coach will meet us, and we return back to camp to check out and head home. I mean, quite a few people decided to stay on another night, so that's something that you can pay extra for if you wanted to camp an extra night, or likewise if you wanted to arrive early, say on the Thursday or Wednesday or whatever. As long as we know at the beginning that that's what you'd like to do, then we can arrange that for an extra charge just for the extra night's camping, really. So oops, sorry. So do let us know if that's something you'd like, and we can arrange for that to happen. So that second day, meals included breakfast and packed lunch. We don't supply the evening meal then, but we finished around about 3:30, I think, on the Sunday, 4 o'clock maybe. And of course, again, because it's June, traveling back, if you did have to get back that day, hopefully you do most of that in the light as well. But that's 10 miles that second day. And of course, after the previous day, it feels, you know, so much shorter, but still really interesting as well. Okay, so the support that you're going to get, the fundraising teams at Autism Anglia, Autism Hampshire, Autism Wessex, and the North East Autism Society, they'll support you through the challenge with your fundraising. So there's no problem there with ideas and so on. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to give you some ideas and support there. From us, we'll be able to provide you with a kit list, full trip dossier, training guide, and also discount vouchers as well. And as I said before, you'd be accompanied by a first aid trained tour manager like myself, and also a professional local guide, or guides, I should say, at least 2. And also you'd have that pre-departure meeting, and you can meet your teammates, you know, by then you'd know who'd be traveling, and also hopefully your tour manager as well, or myself, just to go over the sort of pre-departure information and so on that you need to know. Okay, so yeah, your fundraising journey starts here if you know that this is what you'd like to do. So here's the process really. So there's a registration fee straight away of £95 payable by each person at the time of booking. And then you're asked to fundraise at least £550 for your chosen autism charity. And then further to just say, you don't have to raise all of that by the 29th of April. It looks like you only need to raise 440 by the 29th of April. Is that right, Anna? Yeah. And then the remaining £110 can be paid upon completion of the trip. So that's a minimum amount that they're asking you to raise in total, 550. So yeah, I think that's amazing, really. And so the trip includes 2 nights pitch at the campsite, 2 evening meals, 2 packed lunches and 2 breakfasts, transport between the campsite and the start and finish points, the UK walking guides and different tour manager. But what it doesn't include are your personal expenses for snacks, drinks and so on, and transport to and from the campsite, travel insurance, even though it's a UK trip, and I expect most of us think, oh, we don't need insurance, but it is a good idea to have the travel insurance, particularly, you know, in the light of COVID and everything. If you have booked extra hotels or B&Bs on the way, you know, it's quite good to get that sorted. Your trekking kit, your tent and your camping equipment is also not included. Any questions on the fundraising amounts and deadlines or anything? No.
If we don't collect that much, are we still able to go?
Perhaps I'll transfer that question over to one of the autism reps. Which region are you in? Was that Paul?
Yeah, that's me. It's Wessex. Paul, we can obviously help out as much as we can in terms of supporting you and your efforts in fundraising. We'll see what we can do. What we're trying to do is make sure that all of the charities are setting the same kind of criteria and standards that we all want to be achieving. And we'll do what we can do to help you with that. Ideally, that is what we would like all of our participants to raise. But obviously, every person is different. And if it takes a little bit longer, you know, if it's a deadline that's the challenge, then we can look at that as an individual aside from everybody else.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Did anybody else have any questions on that part? Okay, so and this is how you can book. So you can visit different travel and find the Hadrian's Wall Trek for Autism, and you can book it by pressing this little button down here that this arrow is pointing at, and then you'll be able to put all of your details on there, and also how you wanted to pay for your deposit as well, your registration fee. Just make sure that you do state which autism charity you're going to be supporting. That's so important, because obviously we've got 4 different charities here, and we want to make sure that anything that you raise goes to your chosen charity. Okay, so I've been talking for quite a long time now. Perhaps we can open it up to questions, and then I'll stop the recording.
I have a few questions.
Yeah, sure.
Just as you were talking really about the camping, did I hear you say that we've got a whole field, so it doesn't matter what size tent? Because I know I myself have got a sort of a 6-person family tent. So ideally I wouldn't bring that for just me, or if there's people sharing, but otherwise that's an expense of buying a smaller tent. So I just didn't want to think that were people restricted by the size of the tent.
No, yeah, maybe not a marquee.
No.
Just for the sake of other people, but the size of the pitch, yeah, is large enough to accommodate, you know, a large family tent. That's fine.
Yeah,
no problem.
And you mentioned about electric hookup. I know you can't guarantee where we will be camping necessarily, but would that be a standard?
Not a standard, no. That will be available at an extra charge. So on your booking form, do express that you would like electric, and it will be first come first serve for those electric served pitches.
Okay, yeah. And about packing up the tent as well. I mean, you mentioned on the day 3, you got back to the campsite about 3:30. Obviously, some people might want to stay overnight, and so would keep their tent up and stay the extra night at their own expense. But for anybody leaving, would they be expected to pack down in the morning before we head off, or would that be available after we get?
No, they can pack up either in the morning if they prefer to make a quick getaway, or they can pack it up when they come back from the walk. That's fine. That's something that we've sorted out for future trips.
Yeah. Great. No, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Anyone else? Oh, I've just noticed a hand. Nicholas, sorry, that's very clever. You've got a hand. I couldn't see everybody on the gathering view I've got. Hi, Nicola.
Hi. My question is, what fundraising platform have you got one that you're using specifically for this, or are we going to set up our own?
I'm going to have to field that to one of the autism charity.
Yes, I'll answer that if you like. So Nicola's come through Autism Hampshire. So yes, we I think each autism charity will have their own preferred platform that they're using. We are now moving to Just Giving, as Virgin Money Giving is actually closing at the end of November. So we will be able to send you our Just Giving link and help you with setting up your fundraising page, and each charity will do that for their own fundraisers and participants taking part.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
I think just to follow up on that, it's important that people know that yes, it is a challenge, and it's from our side, it's a fundraising challenge, but it doesn't stop people self-paying as well. So you can do a mixture of self-pay and fundraise, or entirely self-pay or entirely fundraise. So it just gives a few more options for people.
Thanks for that, Carol. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I mean, it's up to the charities what they decide, but quite often these trips people decide, actually, I just want to go anyway, or they think, well, I would pay half of that amount, let's say, myself for a trip like that. I'll just fundraise the rest of it. But yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Carol. Any other questions? Okay. Right. I don't know if any of the autism charity representatives would like to say a word here, but I think that's everything from me. Would anybody else like to add anything?
No, I haven't got anything to add, apart from thank you. Thank you for coming and listening, and thank you, Jude, for taking the time to tell us more about the trip. It was really good to hear that you've been on the trip and can talk a bit about it from a personal point of view, and probably if anybody's got any questions, they can either contact their charity rep, and then we can get in contact with Jude and ask her first-hand questions if that need be. But no, I just wanted to say thank you, and I'm looking forward to it even more now.
Okay, brilliant. Right, I'm just going to press stop recording now, so we can kind of have a